Namaskaram everyone. In this video I'm trying to understand who is Linga Bhairavi Devi. Like in the entire Hindu pantheon, which Devi is she representing? So obviously she is Bhairavi, which is actually a well-known name, but I don't know much about Bhairavi as a Devi. In this video we just look at the Bhairavi within the Mahavidyas, the forms of Durga, also what role does Kali play and those kind of things. This is my way of spending Navratri as well. We are just coming towards Navratri and this is, I feel, a good way for me to spend it, so that by the time the Navratri will actually come, I will have a lot more clarity about Linga Bhairavi and I would have invested so much thought and energy into her already in this form of content creation, and also just understanding, learning, reading more about Devi forms and all that stuff. And obviously, all said and done, I can only do my explorations of this content. The ultimate word would always be of Sadhguru, because even within the Indic understanding, the creator of the deity, whoever has done the consecration, set the form and set all of the sadhana processes for her, would be the one who would know this deity the best, because Indic culture is extremely nuanced. As you know that even some of our most well-known stories, if we go into the Shakta path, which is the Devi path, the stories will change where the Devi becomes greater. In the Shaiva path, Shiva becomes the greater. In the Vaishnav path, Vishnu becomes the greater one. And the stories change little bit, and especially these are just the three big paths. If you go to any of the small specific Sampradayas, within them the entire forms, the important forms are different. Their definition of specific forms changes. For example, in certain understanding, Kal Bhairav is considered only a small guardian deity, but in a lot of understandings he is considered like an ultimate form of Shiva. So my point is, when we go into specific Sampradayas, the entire thing changes. That the stature they give to specific deities changes completely. The sadhana methods change, or so many things change. So we have to understand that while there are general stories floating around, the nuanced understanding within each sampradaya is completely different. And because Sadhguru has set up Linga Bhairavi, he would be the ultimate on her at the end of the day. So keep watching. Especially nowadays, when the usual prathas like heritage from ancestral lines of worship is breaking. A lot of people are nowadays not aware of their own personal sampradayas, their own personal lineages and stuff that is most relevant for them. And I think a lot of y'all will kind of resonate when I do this analysis, just looking at a lot of different Devi stories and Devi contexts to kind of piece together stuff. I think a lot of us are going to have to go through this process, because I do think it is really important to understand deities better. I think it is really important. And of course, I think in general if Linga Bhairavi Devi is who we want to worship, then we are lucky in the sense that Sadhguru himself has put forth his sadhana methods and all, and we can just follow it. But this is more about just understanding Linga Bhairavi within the Hindu pantheon. And one of the first names that comes right away is Durga, and there are actually two reasons why. One is because at the feet of Bhairavi, there are the bull, the horns of the bull, which is the Mahishasura. And the Mahishasura is completely connected to Mahishasura Mardini, and that is a form of Durga. So that goes to Durga right away. Second reason it goes to Durga is because, surprisingly, the moment I started searching for Bhairavi in Mahavidyas, I got articles of how Durga is like the Bhairavi of Mahavidyas. Because if you see, the 10 Mahavidyas does not have a Durga in it. And then I read a little and they were saying the Bhairavi is the one that most resembles Durga. This is debatable, I'm sure, because as I was mentioning, different contexts, different sampradayas say different things. But why is Durga not in the Mahavidyas? And my understanding is because she is being considered as the Adishakti, the form of Adishakti, who then becomes the aspects of whom are the 10 Mahavidyas. So then if we are looking at her as the mother goddess, like the one goddess from whose many aspects are these Mahavidyas. And I believe the way the deities work is that the logical mind will say that if Kali, for example, is just one aspect of the mother goddess, then the mother goddess is more than Kali. But it is not like that. I think the way the deities work is that if Kali is one aspect of mother goddess, then Kali is also the mother goddess, and mother goddess is also Kali. I think so this part of why Mahishasura for Bhairavi was kind of a little bit muddling for me. It was confusing and conflicting for me, but it makes sense to me that if the mother goddess is Durga and Bhairavi is an aspect of her, and thus Bhairavi can reflect aspects of Durga, and vice versa, Durga can also reflect aspects of Bhairavi. So in this way it makes sense to me that okay, Bhairavi can have the Mahishasura Mardini horns, and of course Sadhguru has given a great explanation for these horns. There is of course the whole scriptural and traditional story of Mahishasura being an Asura, there's a very long story on how that Asura gets killed by the Durga form, who is then known as the Mahishasura Mardini. And there are some very powerful iconography murtis of Mahishasura Mardini in this form where she's just slaying Mahishasura. But more than that, I also want to put a note here that this is my Arunachala calendar that I got from Tiruvannamalai, and the Mahishasura Mardini slaying, the Mahishasura slaying, there is one version of it that Parvati was actually doing penance on Arunachala at that point of time. Why she was doing penance is part of a whole different story. But she was doing penance on Arunachala, and that's when Mahishasura's army comes, and all these Devis forms and Durga and all of Bhairavs and all go and start attacking the Mahishasura's army, and then finally the death of Mahishasura happens. And then once that death happens, then Mahishasura was also a great Shiva Bhakt, and that is why Parvati, who is an Arunachalam, she ends up having a lingam stuck to her hand. She has to do penance for it. And she does the penance in one of the water tanks in Tiruvannamalai. So it's interesting that these two are here, and this story has a little bit of Arunachala in it. So I thought I'll just share that bit in it. But so coming to Linga Bhairavi again, so yes, the Mahishasura story as per Sadhguru is very interesting. He talks about it as being the animal nature within us. That's also very relevant and very practical interpretation of this. So every time Devi is standing on top of the horns, which means that our animal nature has been quelled and the Devi has flowered. So yes, that explains these horns. And then we have the 10 hands. That's also interesting because even quick Google searches which goddess has 10 hands pretty much is bringing up the name of Durga. So that correlates well with the Mahishasura and the hands. So yes, I did do some research into Tripura Bhairavi. There honestly did not seem too much similarity to Linga Bhairavi, at least in terms of the online content that was available to me even when I'm digging deep. I must mention online content is very limited even today. Even so much content is available online about deities and Sampradayas. Considering the offline conversations that I've had, the online content is very little. Tripura Bhairavi basically rules the Muladhara, and that is where all the three nadis meet. And I think she's like, Tripura Sundari and Tripura Bhairavi are like two sides of a coin, where Tripura Sundari sits in the Sahasrara, where also the three nadis meet. And Tripura Bhairavi, yes, as I mentioned, is also has touches of Durga to her, even though she is the Bhairav aspect in the sense she does frequent places like the Smashan and all, but she is a little more regal, I would say. I don't know, regal is the right word. I think each person would have a different way of expressing this feeling. She's not so stark and deathly, basically. Some of the explanations being given for this name of Bhairav or Bhairavi is that it comprises of three words, Bha, Ra and Va, where Bha means Bharanam, Ra means Ramanam, and Va is Vamanam. Basically, it means the force of creation, preservation, and destruction. So the same way we have the three Murti, which are three separate gods. They are saying what makes Bhairav the greatest god is because it's a union of the Bhairava, the three Murtis. So all the three forces are present in the Bhairavs. I mean, the second thing I want to mention is Kal Bhairav is the consort of Bhairavi. That's important for multiple reasons. One is because Sadhguru is going to set up a Kal Bhairav, and that's super exciting. But it's very, very relevant for me because, I did this whole series on Bhairav and especially focusing on Kal Bhairava and my own experience of it. So for me, from there I came and I started unraveling the Devi. The other interesting thing I found about Linga Bhairavi and how she resembles Tripura Bhairavi, who is one of the Das Mahavidya, is that Tripura, which means that the three, that the Bhairavi rules three worlds. And for Linga Bhairavi, she embodies Tamas, Rajas and Sattva, which can be considered three worlds like Tamasic world, Rajasic world and Sattvic world. Now the interesting thing is that when Navratri comes along, which will happen in a few days now, the 9 days of Navratri, the Linga Bhairavi Devi is considered as Tamasic in the first 3 days as the form of Durga, 3 days of Rajasic as in Lakshmi, and 3 days of Saraswati at the end. So basically she goes through Tamas, Rajas and then Sattva. Like Lakshmi for Rajas and Saraswati for Sattva, I understand, but Durga for Tamasic was again a little surprise because shouldn't it be Kali? Because if I think of a Tamasic goddess, first name is Kali for me. But then I don't also see anything wrong with it because Durga obviously has many forms and she definitely has a few Tamasic forms. So if she's the 3 days of Tamasic Navratri days are being taken as Durga, that's fair enough. I mean, it is in fact interesting that Durga is being mentioned in context to Linga Bhairavi. But Durga definitely in the Navratri, now Durgas also, which we call, there are some Tamasic forms. So it's not really a... But so doesn't Kali feature at all in Linga Bhairavi? So there was this bit, once I had earlier also spoken about this in the Shwet and Kal Bhairav video. In that video also we are looking at the Saumya forms and the Ugra forms of Bhairav. And in that context I had mentioned there was one email that I read from Sadhguru which was really surprising for me because this was the first time that I had read where he clearly mentions that Devi has two forms like Gauri versus Kali, Gauri being the Saumya one, Kali being the Ugra one. And in that he clearly mentions Linga Bhairavi as a Kali. So that really struck me because I never thought of Linga Bhairavi as a Kali because Kali for me is... It's very Tamasic first of all, but more than that, the very, very fierce Ugra, more going towards the Shmashan and Tantra and the animal sacrifice and very that side of things. So, but then obviously I understood also that this email, when he's saying Gauri versus Kali, he's not talking about a specific goddess, he's talking about the Saumya forms versus the Ugra forms. So in that sense we are saying that Linga Bhairavi is Ugra. The ambience of Linga Bhairavi temple and the colorful saris, the diyas and the sadhakas who go there, the women are usually decked up like anything. It all feels very glorious, like a Durga actually. Like Durga is considered a glorious goddess. Like Kali, a lot of times you will consider as Shmashanik or like very, very plain, straight, very straight, like too straight. Durga will be the regal one, the one with, the shine and that's what comes to my mind. And Linga Bhairavi falls there for me because in terms of just the decor and though of course the Kayanthasthanam rituals do happen in the Linga Bhairavi temple as well, which is very interesting. The Kayantasthanam rituals are basically the rituals for the dead and the deceased people. Yeah, so I guess she basically embodies all three forms, Tamasic, Rajas and Sattvic. He's basically created a mother goddess which has reflections of Durga, but Durga, it's like, as I was mentioning, this was always completely interchangeable. Like the mother goddess could be Durga and Tripura Bhairavi, or you could just flip and say Linga Bhairavi and Durga is the Tamasic form. I think it's actually a beauty of a culture that deity forms are so amazingly intricate and intermingling, and it's just like brilliant actually, because there is just not one form, 1,000 different forms. It's just so amazing.